योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचाम् मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिम् गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः हरिः ओम्. So we are at Sutra 3.13. Etena bhūtendriyeṣu dharmalakṣaṇāvasthāpariṇāmā vyākhyātāḥ. We are going through the long bhashya on this sutra, which is touching upon several philosophical questions, specifically the aspect of dharmi and the dharma, an entity and its attributes, and more specifically the question of, given the nature of prakriti as described, where it is constituted of sattva, raja, tama gunas, which are forever in motion, so to speak, in movement, undergoing transformation, then how does parinama, how does transformation, how is that characterized by this darshana? In the previous sutras, this was illustrated in the context of chitta undergoing nirbija samadhi and samprajñata samadhi and a normal worldly vyutthana state, and the different types of parinamas involved in that. And in this sutra, that is being extended to each and every thing in the material world by saying bhūtendriyas. So the bhutas and the indriyas, to all of them, the same understanding of parinama can be applied. Now, we have been going through the commentary, and so far, last time we talked about lakshana parinama, which has this aspect of triyadva. Triyadva refer to the three paths, so to speak, which is anagata, something that is yet to happen, yet to come, which normally we would say it lies in the future in a potential state. Then vartamana, which is manifested, active, has its vyapara, the present, so to speak, and atita, which has manifested and since then gone away. So this triyadva we have been discussing, and Vyasa brings up several objections to this thesis and then addresses them one by one. So last time we had looked at one particular objection called adva sankaraha, and we saw how that is resolved by Vyasa's explanation. Now we will continue. The context was किंतु केवलं सामान्येन समन्वागत इत्यस्य तदा तत्र तस्य भावः तथा लक्षणस्य इति. So it was in the context of the lakshana and the triyadva, which we say the potential state, the active or the present tense state, and the atita, the already acted, the gone away, the past tense state. So now we continue where Vyasa says, Na dharmi triyadva. So this is a short statement, but where Vyasa is saying that while we talked about the three advas of potential, active, and gone away, faded away, that referred to the lakshanas of the dharmas, the attributes. However, na dharmi triyadva, the dharmi itself, the underlying entity, the substrate whose attributes underwent the lakshana parinamas, the thing whose attributes they were, that is, or they are, the underlying entity, the substrate, the dharmi, that is not triyadva. That does not have these three parts. Dharmastu triyadvanaha. The dharmas, the attributes, they have these three marks of potential, active and gone away, but the underlying entity, because it is an anvayi, it subsists through all these three states of potential, present, and past. Therefore, the underlying entity, the dharmi, is not triyadva. But dharmas are triyadvanaha. Dharma tu triyadvanaha. Te lakshita alakshitaścha tam tam avastham prapnuvantaha अन्यत्वेन प्रतिनिर्दिश्यन्ते अवस्थान्तरतः न द्रव्यांतरतः. So these dharmas and the three paths, the three advas, lakshitascha alakshitascha, whether seen or marked or unmarked, that is manifested or unmanifested, tam tam avastham prapnuvantaha, having attained those states in question. Here the avastha is a general term. It is a general term that stands for the state, and not the technical term that is specifically has a narrow meaning in the sense of avasthāpariṇāmā, has a more specific meaning there. Here in this sentence, the avastha is a general broader meaning of a state of a thing. So the dharmas, they are sometimes lakshita, sometimes alakshita, and they attain those various states. Tam tam avastham prapnuvantaha, having, while they attain these various states, anyatvena pratinirdisyante. They can be labeled in different ways. They are seen or they are visible in different ways because they really do attain different lakshanas. But this being visible in different states, so you might say the mud is now a pot, the clay is now a pot, now it is a lump of clay, etc. The dharmi, there is clay, and the dharmas, there is the dharma of being a pot, the attribute of being a pot, the attribute of being a lump, etc. So the dharma is attaining these different lakshanas. The lakshana of being a pot at the present, the lakshana of being a clay at the present, or the lakshana of having been a clay in the past, etc. That the dharmas are attaining that. And therefore they are seen in different ways, they are labeled and called in different ways. But all of these are avasthantarataha na dravyantarataha. In all these states, there is a change of the avastha, there is a change of condition, there is a change of the state, not a change in dravya. The underlying material, the underlying substance, the underlying dravya is not changing. That is what Vyasa is clarifying. And therefore, here when we talk about lakshana parinama, avastha parinama, etc., the dravya itself doesn't change, the dharmi itself doesn't change. Now, an example, a very interesting and beautiful example, which also speaks to sort of the mathematical stage of the philosophers at the time, because he says, Yatha eka rekha shatasthane shatam dashasthane dashekam chaikasthane. So one line, so a vertical line, let's say that stands for 1, it has a different avastha, a different state. It is seen pratinirdisyate, it is seen labeled in a different way if it is in the hundreds place, in a numerical representation. Now the same vertical line, if it is in a tens place, it has a different label, it has a different meaning, it's a different vyavahara, a different understanding. And that same line, if it is in the ones place, it has a different meaning, different label, different understanding. So here a very oblique reference to sort of the decimal number system and numerical representation of that, the written representation, that is coming in an oblique manner in the Vyasa Bhashya, and therefore it would be of interest for historians of mathematics as well. So here it is not being used to explain any mathematical concept, but to explain how the avastha is changing, but the dravya is not changing. So the vertical line is a vertical line, but depending on where it is placed, it is seen, it is treated, it is dealt with. The vyavahara yogyata changes depending on where it is placed. So a very interesting and nice example there. And then yathacha ekatvepi stri, another example in a more day-to-day life Example, ekatvepi stri mata chochate duhita cha swasa cheti. A same lady may be dependent on the particular condition and position, may be referred to as mata, as a mother, referred to as a daughter, or referred to as a sister. It is the same person, it is the same underlying dravya, the same underlying dharmi. But depending on the present conditions and avastha, may be referred to is pratinirdisyate, referred to as mata, duhita, and swasa, daughter, mother, sister, etc. So this covers the discussion on lakshana, the lakshana sankaraha, which we saw last time, and this time a clarification that the dharmi subsists when the lakshanas are changing, with some very interesting examples.
So we are expected to understand the distinction between dharmi and dharma, characterized and characteristics, the substrate and the changes, transformations thereof. So we saw the dharma having the changes. Dharma has lakshana parinama, and then we saw lakshana has avastha parinama. So that's dharma, lakshana, avastha parinamas were discussed earlier. Now coming to the substrate, that is called dharmi, the characterized. Vyasa mentions a specific thing, distinctive factor between dharma and dharmi. So he says, for dharmi, there is no triyadva, which we saw in case of dharma. Potential state, actual state, and latent state. So in the lakshana parinama, we see that there is the changes are taking place from something being potential, it becomes actual, and then that becomes latent. So that's how there is a flow of parinamas in dharma, all characteristics. They have such kind of changes, while not the substrate, not the underlying dharma characterized. So that he makes it clear. So whether it is a manifest state or unmanifest state, abhivyakti or anabhivyakti, there he says the dharmi remains intact, and there won't be any change in substantive aspects, but might be the nomenclature might change. So therefore there is no dravyantarata. But there might be some designatory changes. And he gives wonderful example, as you just have heard. The one line, which represents the first number one number in mathematics. Now, you will explain that if it comes in case of 10, then it becomes 10. That one vertical stroke, that bar, is remaining the same. But you add 1 0 to the left-hand side of the one figure, then it becomes 10. You add one more, it becomes 100. You add one more, it becomes 1,000. So these are namantaras, that the description will be changing 1, 10, 100, 10, 1,000, etc. But that vertical line remains the same. So he is explaining the dharmi, how dharmi is different than dharma. Because we need to look at this when we investigate into matter. We will have to understand the characterized and characteristics, and there should be no confusion between those. Although they are all matters. Characterized is also matter, characteristic is also matter. And but we can see that the avasthantar can be there, but not the dravyantar. So another example, interesting example, is about a woman. Woman is woman. Substantively, she remains the same. But with reference to someone, she is wife. With reference to someone else, she is mother. With reference to someone else, she is sister. So, substantively, mother is not, the woman is not changing, but in relation to different people, she will become different, like wife, mother, daughter, sister. So, it is really important to understand and characterize the characterized entity in investigating metaphysics of the things, prakrutic things or the things made up of prakriti. Like in case of milk is characterized, but then it can become curds, it can become cream. In one kind of parinama, it will become cream. In another kind of parinama, it will become curds. And then you will get butter, and then you will get clarified butter, etc. But the characterized in it remains the same. So in any matter, like gold and golden ornaments, which I have seen earlier. So the gold as a material is the characterized, and then it will have characteristics. It can become bangle, necklace, and various kinds of ornaments. Or the mrittika, mritpinda, the earth, the sand. It can take various forms, and you get the manifestations, and the nomenclature changes. You don't say that looking at a pot, you don't say this is mud. So nomenclatures, namantaranam will be there, but dravyantaranam will not be there. The pot can be broken. It will become chips. So the characterized remains intact. This is something in relation to characteristics we have to understand. That it is more permanent. Characterized is more permanent, not absolutely permanent. The earth can become lump of clay can become wet pot can become baked pot. A baked pot will become container of water, etc. Then it might break. If it breaks, it becomes chips. So, what is inherently there, substantively there, is Prithvi, or the earth. So that's how the dharmi has to be characterized. And in scientific process, we have certain rationale used, certain scientific processes used. In metaphysics also, we have to consider characterized and characteristics. And Vyasa has explained the difference between the two, which is too important in understanding the metaphysics. Okay.
Yes. So now we continue again. Avasthāpariṇāmē kautastya prasanga doshah kaiśchiduktaha. So Vyasa brings about another possible objection in avasthāpariṇāmā. What is that objection? It is kautastya prasanga doshah. Kautastya means kutasthata. Now what is that? We saw that, I think, last time. When we say kutasthata, it says the dharma also is not changing, the dharmi is also not changing, nothing is changing at all. That is kutasthata, absolutely no change. So then, someone Vyasa anticipates an objection that in avasthāpariṇāmā, there is a fault of kautastya prasangata. Now the fault essentially is that on one hand nothing is changing, and on another hand it is being called a parinama. How does this make sense? It is inconsistent, therefore it is wrong. So now Vyasa says, Katham, how is this coming in? How come this objection? And he says, Advanaha vyaparena vyavahitatvat. Because the advas are being differentiated only through vyapara. What he is saying is, in avasthāpariṇāmā, the advas, the three paths that we talked about, potential, active, and gone away. The differentiation is only through vyapara, in how it is being referred to. And there is no fundamental differentiation in avastha-parināma. In avastha-parināma, there is no real abhivyakti or tirobhava, manifestation or going away. There is nothing really happening of that nature, but it is only by how the vyapara exists, how the loka, how people refer to it. Only there that there is a differentiation. Vyavahita means it is differentiated by only the vyapara, only how we refer to it, and there is no essential real change happening there. Therefore, there is kutastata, and then kutastata and parinama are being referred to or being brought in together, and this is wrong, and therefore kautastya prasanga doshaha. Now further he explains this, what is this objection. Yada dharmaha स्वव्यापारं न करोति तदा अनागतो यदा करोति तदा वर्तमानो यदा कृत्वा निवृत्तः तदा अतीत इत्येवं धर्मधर्मिणः लक्षणानाम् अवस्थानां च कौटस्थ्यं प्राप्नोति इति परैः दोष उच्यते. So Vyasa says other people bring in this objection that there is a fault in this reasoning because a given dharma there always exists. When it is in its activity, vyaparam na karoti, when it is not doing that, then it is referred to as anagata. When it does it, it is referred to as vartamana. And having done when it goes away, it is referred to as atita. So, of the dharma, the dharmi, dharma, and the lakshana, and as well as avastha, actually there is kautastya, because only the vyaparas are different. People are referring to it in different terms, but they always exist, that is always there, therefore there is no change at all. And that is the objection that Vyasa brings in, and he is going to resolve that. He says, Na asau doshaha. This is not a fault. This is an invalid objection. Kasmat guni nityattvepi gunanam vimarda vaichitriyat. So he says, because even though the guni, the one who has these gunas, the dharmi, the one who has these dharmas, even though we are saying that that is nitya, that subsists through it, however, gunanam vimarda vaichitriyat. As far as the gunas are concerned, as far as the dharmas are concerned, we do accept the vimarda vaichitriyam. We do accept that there is a coming and going away. There is a manifestation and fading away of the gunas themselves. And since we do accept, we do postulate that the gunas are undergoing change, therefore there is no kautastya. We are saying only the dharmi is nitya. We are not saying that the dharma are nitya, and therefore this accusation that we are talking about kutastata and parinama at the same time, that is invalid. In the Yoga Vartika, this is elaborated. It says, Dharmi nityatvepi dharmanam vimardasya vinashasya kutastato vaichitriat vailakshanyad ityartah aparinami nityata eva kautastham yaccha purushatirikte nasti iti bhavaha. So the same thing is being explained. It says, even though the dharmi is nitya, per our postulation or our explanation, the dharmas are undergoing vimarda, they manifest and they go away. And therefore there is kutasthatah vaichitriam or vailakshanyam. Therefore there is this clear difference from what is known as kutasthatah, because in kutasthatah, not only the dharmi, the dharmas, if any, are also said to be unchanging. However, we do accept that the dharmas are undergoing change. And therefore, aparinami nityata eva kautasthyam yaccha. So the nityata where there is absolutely no transformation, only that is kautasthyam. And that is there only in the purusha. And purushatirikte nasti iti bhavaha. Anything other than purusha, we are not claiming that both the dharmas and dharmis are constant. And therefore this kautastya prasanga doshaha, which has been alleged, is invalid, and therefore our doctrine remains sound. That is what Vyasa says. And then again, he gives some examples. Vyasa says, Yatha samsthanamadimat dharma matram shabdadinam gunanam vinashi avinashinam evam lingam adimat dharma matram sattvadinam. Okay, let us go first. Let's say half the sentence. Yatha samsthanamadimat dharma matram shabdadinam gunanam avinashinam vinashi. So just like the Prithvi, Aap, Tej, Vayu, Akash and the bhutas and objects built thereof, they are adimat, means they are karyam, they come into being. They are the samsthanam. They are coming from the shabda, etc. Shabda, sparsha, rupa, rasa, gandha, which are avinashi with respect to that. So, just like the Prithvi, Aap, Tej, Vayu, Akasha, the bhutas that evolve from shabda, sparsha, rupa, rasa, gandha, and even though the shabda, sparsha, rupa, rasa, gandha can be accepted as avinashi, not going away in this frame of reference, the Prithvi, Aap, Tej, Vayu, Akasha do go away. There is a vinasha for them. Their manifestation will cease. So that is one example being given. Similarly, he says, Evam lingamadimat dharma matram sattvadinam gunanam vinashi avinashinam. Similarly, the linga refers to the mahat tattva. So we have seen vishesha, avishesha, linga matra, lingani, guna parvani, etc. So with respect to the sattvadi gunas, sattvara-jatama gunas, this lingam or the mahat is a adimat. That is something that has evolved from it, has a beginning. Now, something that has a beginning also has an end. So that is one of the fundamental axioms in all the darshanas. So the linga, the mahat that comes into being is a vinashi. It also goes away. With respect to the avinashi is there, which are sattva rajatama. In that frame of reference, the sattva rajatama is the avinashi. So similarly, he says there is no kautastya here because the dharmas do have utpatti and vinasha, even though in that frame of reference the dharmis can be considered a vinashi, and therefore there is no kautastya because the dharmas are changing, even though the dharmis are postulated as subsisting. Now, tasmin vikara sanya iti. This is known as vikara. So, it's a vikara sanya means the term used here, he says, is known as vikara. Now, this example was about a tattvantaram, the very tattva itself of the Sankhya Yoga school, that itself are undergoing change. Because in the first example, it was the Sabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, the Tanmatras as the dharmis, and the bhutas are the dharmas. These are accepted as different tattvas. In the second example, the Sattva-Rajatama gunas as the underlying tattvas turning into Mahat, which is the Linga Matra. Again, there was a Tattvantar. So these two examples, which were meant to counter the accusation of Kautastya dosha, are about a Tattvantara Parinama. Now he gives a normal Avasthāntara Parināma example of a normal word. He says, Tatra idam udaharanam. Mruddharmi pindākārāt dharmāt dharmāntaram upasampadhyamāno dharmatah parinamate ghatākārah iti. So, a pinda, a lump of clay, mruddharmi pindākāram. So, the clay had a certain dharma of being a lump. That gets changed into a different dharma of being a pot, a ghata, a jar. So, here the clay remains the same as the dharmi, but the pindakara and the ghatakara, the nature of being a lump, that is the lumpness, so to speak, the nature of being a lump is different, and the nature of being a pot, ghatakara, or a jar, that is different. So here an example is not a tattvantara example, it's a normal example of something a normal regular substance or such as clay undergoing transformation to attain a different dharma. Because the vyapara becomes different. The vyavahara with a lump is said this is a lump of clay. The vyavahara with a pot, it is said this is a pot. So here there is a dharma is changing even though the dharmi is not changing. And therefore, there is no kautastya prasanga dosha in both these types of examples, whether you take a tattvantara or a normal transformation. So, using this example, he explains further. He says, Ghatakaro anagatam lakshanam hitva vartamana lakshanam pratipadyate iti lakshanataha parinamate. So, earlier, with respect to the dharmi, the clay, it said, the dharma of being a lump goes away and the dharma of being a pot arises. Now, here with respect to the dharma itself, the ghatakara is a dharma, the potness, the being a pot, the nature of being a pot. If you consider that as a dharma and that is as a focus of discussion, what happens to it? So the ghatakara had a lakshanam of being anagatam. It had a lakshanam of the mark, so to speak, of being anagata. It has not arrived, so it is in the potential state. It is not something that has come. So it had the anagata state. Hitva, giving up that particular lakshana, that mark, it took on the vartamana state. That it is now arrived, it is in the present, it is active. So with respect to the Ghatakara was always there as a dharma, even when that thing was a lump. But that dharma existed as Ghatakara, but it had the mark of being Anagata, therefore it was not seen, it did not have the Vyavahara Yogyata. Then it gives up that mark of being Anagata and it attains that mark of being Vartamana, and therefore that dharma which also existed. So not only did the clay exist, but the dharma had existed with different lakshanas. So the Vartamana lakshana, it attains, and therefore lakshanataha parinamate. Now further, this example continues. Ghataha navapuranatam pratikshanam anubhavan avasthāpariṇāmam pratipadyate iti. So now we talked about firstly the mrit as the clay as the dharmi. Then we talked about the pindakara and the ghatakara as the dharmas. Then the lakshana was anagata, vartamana and atita. Now we talk about the ghata itself, the pot. What happens to it? Navapuranatam pratikshanam anubhavan. Every moment it experiences the navapuranatam, being new and older, slightly older, further older. So it goes from being a new thing to an older and older thing. So these are avasthas. Nava puranatam pratikshanam anubhavan avasthāpariṇāmam. So every moment it is undergoing the avasthāpariṇāmā, the transformation with respect to avastha, in terms of being nava, new, and purana, old. So the pot becomes older and older. So anubhavan, every moment it is experiencing avasthāpariṇāmam pratipadyate iti. And therefore, dharminaha api dharmantaram avastha, dharmasyapi lakshanantaram avastha ityekah eva dravya parinamaha bhedena upadarshitaha iti. So he says the dharmi is undergoing a dharmantaram. The dharma is undergoing a lakshanantaram, a change. So dharmi is undergoing a change in the dharma. So that is the underlying entity is undergoing a change in the characteristic or the attribute. The dharma is undergoing a change in the lakshana. The attribute itself attains different lakshanas. And lakshanantaram avastha ityeke. So essentially, there is only ekaha eva dravya parinamaha. As regards to the dravya, this whole thing is just one parinama, but bhedena upadarshitaha. It is seen, explained, and postulated for understanding in this darshana through these bhedas, these different perspectives, different aspects of dharma, lakshana, avastha, parinama. But with respect to the dravya, it is eka eva dravya parinamaha, says Vyasa. So evam, he says, similarly, padarthantareshu api yojyam iti. So similarly, this was given with an example of a pot, but padarthantareshu, with respect to other things also, this should be applied. Evam yojyam should be applied. Now this is also nicely elaborated here. In other texts, it says, Nachayam niyamaha lakshananam eva avastha parinama iti sarvesham eva dharma lakshana avastha vedanam avastha shabda vachyatvat eka eva avastha parinamaha sarvasadharanaha iti. So it says, there is no such rule that only for lakshanas we should say avastha parinama, because sarvesham eva, with respect to dharma, lakshana and avastha, for all these different aspects, avastha shabda can be used by saying avastha as a state. So avastha shabda vachyatvat, all of this can be said as eka eva avastha parinamaha sarvasadharanaha. So in general terms, generally speaking, one might say that eka eva avastha parinamaha. All of this is a change of state. Now again, elsewhere I am quoting from Tattva Visharadi. He says, Samanadhikaranyadvarena dharmi eva dharmaha iti yavat. So there is one concept of Samanadhikaranyam, which is very important in different, in Vyakaranam, in grammar, in different darshanas, in understanding. So essentially it says that if two words have the same underlying substrate, then they are referring to the underlying substrate. So for example, if you say in Sanskritam, if you say Sundaraha Ramaha, so the Sundaraha, the underlying substrate is that same person, and the Ramaha, the underlying substrate is the same person. So the word Sundaraha and the term Ramaha are said to be in Samanadhikaranyam. They have the same adhara. So Sundaraha Ramaha means there is the same adhara. So therefore, the thing denoted by the word Sundaraha and the thing denoted by the word Ramaha are the same. It is the same underlying person. So that is Samanadhikarana Prayogaha. Now, just to say, there can be another way to characterize. You could say Rame Saundaryam. Just there is Saundaryam, there is beauty in Rama. So now this is not a Samanadhikarana Prayoga. This is what is known as a Vyadhikarana Prayoga, because it says there is beauty in Rama. So the adhara of Saundaryam is denoting a different thing, and Rama is denoting a different thing when you say Rame Saundaryam. However, if you say Sundaraha Ramaha, both these terms are referring to the same entity. So here, Samanadhikaranyadvarena dharmi eva dharmaha iti yavat. So, because they are the same adhara, the dharmas and the dharmi, it is the same entity. Tadeka eva parinamo dharmi parinama eva ityartaha dharmalakṣaṇāvasthānām dharmi swarupam anatikrantaha dharmi swarupabhi niveshat. So therefore, one explanation of this is to say the adhikarana, the adhara of the dharma, the lakshana, the avastha, all of that are the same adhara, which is the dharmi, and therefore we could say that this is a eka eva parinama, because all of them parinamas were, while explained and understood as applying to different aspects, the underlying adhara of all these aspects is the same dharmi, and therefore you could say that this is eka eva parinamaha. And this that was explained with reference to the ghata, the pot, is to be padarthantareshu api yojyam, is to be applied with other padarthas also, with each and every entity. And thereby Vyasa is sort of explaining this whole doctrine of parinama with reference to what the conception of the Prakriti, which is made up of Sattva, Raja, Tama, which are said to be ever changing and ever undergoing transformations.
So in Bhuta Parinama, we always find something constant. Like something earthen, the earth is constant. Something of metal, that metal is constant. Like example of gold which was taken. The gold seems to be constant there. It can become bracelet, necklace, or ring, or a pot or vessel. The gold is seen as constant. So in the material world, we see something as constant. And the dharmi characterized is also explained as something constant. The characteristics are not constant. Moment to moment changes are there. And various states are coming and they are passing out. But there is something as constant. So the argument came that is this constant, not of the nature of kautastham? Now, there is no word for kautastham in any other language, because the Purusha Tattva, Atma Tattva, Atma Chaitanya is something which is constant. It is always constant. It is absolutely constant. That is only absolutely constant. Other things, although may be referred as constant, they are not absolutely constant. So kautastham, kutam, and this was discussed earlier, that the Atma Tattva, Atma Chaitanya resides in some kind of kuta, and in that sense, although being kutastha, there is nityatvam. So kautasthya nityatvam is only and exclusively to the spiritual entity, Purusha Tattva, Atma Tattva, Atma Chaitanya. Elsewhere we will see constant things. Like the sun can be referred to as constant, because generation after generation having been seeing the same sun. The sun is not changing. Sun has not changed for last 4,500 million years. And is going to be still there for another 6,500 million years. So, the sun also can be referred to as constant. But then it is not constancy of the nature of Atma Tattvam, which is metaphysically declared to be eternal, immutable, indestructible. So its constancy is totally different, and therefore whatever constant or constancy has been mentioned, it is not of the nature of kutasthata, of Purusha Tattva. So this has been made clear by Vyasa. Now so many rocks, etc., they seem to be unchanged for over centuries. Many generations have been seeing the rocks as they are. They have not changed. But they are not absolutely constant, because they have evolved from material phenomenon, sattva, raja, tama gunas. Say even in case of metal, gold, the gold was on one hand described to be a constant thing, although it might change the forms. There is no dravyantaranam, but rupantaranam, namantaranam is there, not the dravyantaranam. Gold remains as gold, whether it is bangle form or whether it is ring form or necklace form or bracelet form, any form, gold is gold. But is the gold like kutastha? Is there kutastha nityata? That is ruled out. No, there is no kutastha nityata. The sun doesn't have kutastha nityata. Any metal will be metal for 10,000 years, but yet it is not kutastha nityata. Because there are always changes taking place, navapuranata, from newness to oldness, because all those things which have come into existence are going towards getting perished. And therefore there will be a navapuranata with respect to all matters made of sattva, raja, tama gunas. And that's why the discussion about Kutastha Nityata came because there were some philosophers, even in the Indian philosophical system, that they did not accept entity of Atma. They were called as Anatmavadi Darshanas. They did not postulate, did not accept, as a matter of fact, rejected anything entity of that nature. But the Sankhyas and the Astikas definitely maintained and stuck onto a principle called Kautastha Nityata, the Atma, which is really eternal, absolutely eternal. And as I just now said, even the sun seems to be eternal, but it is not. The sun's lifespan is 10,000 million years, and thereafter it is not going to be there. So relatively it seems to be constant. Metals relatively seem to be constant. But they are constituted of material matters, prakritic matters, and therefore Sattva Rajat Gunas are always in changing forms. They may not change in dravyam, but they will be changing in dharma, lakshana, avastha, etc., etc. Parinamas. Gunas are subject to parinamas. They can never be without parinama. Parinama will never cease in gunas. This is the metaphysics of Prakriti. So, the Kautastha Nityata was also brought in and to tell us that dharmi seems to be constant, gold seems to be constant, the earth seems to be constant in all earthen manifestations, gold in golden manifestations. But is it really Kautastha Nityata? No, it is totally dissimilar. Totally dissimilar. So although dharmi has been spoken as nitya, it is not Kautastha Nityata. This metaphysical position has been made clear by Vyasa. And elsewhere, the changes are taking place. Dravyantaranam may not be there, but Rupantaranam, Namantaranam will be there. But anyway, the matter is always moving from newness to oldness. Once a thing comes into existence, it is going towards the death of itself. That's not the case of Atma Tattva. The metaphysical spiritual entity is indeed birthless and therefore deathless, and indeed absolutely immutable, and therefore the Kutastha Nityata is unique to only one thing and nowhere else it will be there. So in order to be a good metaphysicist, Vyasa tells us that whatever objects you see are at sight, you must try to have this kind of thought process as to, like in science, they'll have inquiry into cause and effect. If something is seen, it is effect of what? And then try to know what is the effect. It is effect of what? Every time they deduct and go backwards to ultimately come to a first cause of something. So this inquiry must be there. Those who are metaphysicists inquiring into matter, in all padarthas, all that comes to your sight, you must try to know what is the cause of this. Then what is the cause of the cause? What is the cause of the cause of the cause? What is the cause of the cause of the cause of the cause? This inquiry is essential in metaphysics. Just as in science, they inquire about causes. So they go on inquiring about cause of the cause. And therefore, this kind of analysis must be applied. Then we will know how something is nitya relatively and how something is anitya. And therefore, we will be able to understand what is absolutely nitya. And that is Purusha Tattva, Atma Tattva, Atma Chaitanya, the self. That is the Kutastha. The Kutastha has wonderful two interpretation. Kuta, like in an anvil. In anvil, so many things are founded. But that anvil remains untouched. That is, it is not dented. But the things are transformed from being solid to powdery things, etc., etc. So that's pounding. That's one meaning, that Puta means a pounder. The other one is a company of all bad things. The bad things are also called Puta. And then there are all these bad things, despite being in it, it is immutable. Prakriti, samskar, vasana, vritti, the ahankaradi, mahadadi, parināmā. So Atma is residing within all that. Sarvantaryami. It is the centric principle in the life manifestations. So all the putas are surrounding the Atma Tattva, yet it is immutable. It is not muted. It remains pristine. So that's the puta has two meanings. Although being pounded from all conditions, all kinds of turmoil in life, yet it remains the same. Like we experience pain, pleasure, delight, sorrows of various degrees, and then we are pulverized in this mundane world, yet that remains intact. No dents. It is untouched, undented. And that is why that is called Kutastha. Atma Tattva is Kutastha. And therefore in Indian languages, this Kutasthata has been postulated. Because Atma remains untouched. Because the life form may become from ant to dinosaur to human being to demon to gods, but that remains unchanged. We go from different ages, from just born, infanthood, fresh life to decrepancy and rotten life condition. Yet that is intact. It is untouched. So that Kautastha Nityata is the word only that is available in Sanskrit and Sanskrit-born languages. Such permanency is not there mentioned elsewhere. So Atma Nityatvam is one, and Prakriti Nityatvam is another kind of thing. So Dharmi, when it was explained as constant, Vyasa has also brought to notice this aspect because, as I said, there are some philosophers in Indian philosophical systems, Anatmavadis, Nastikas, Atma is rejected and not accepted. And Dharmi should not be mistaken to Kutastha Tattva. Although it will be Nitya, Dharmi will be Nitya, like gold is Nitya, iron, metal is Nitya, earth is Nitya, with reference to all its parināmas. Dharmi doesn't get ejected from any parināmas. In all dharmas, Dharmi remains intact. But yet, that Nityatvam is totally different than Nityatvam of metaphysical entity of the consciousness, or what is called a spiritual principle. And that's why Kutasthata doesn't have any other translation in any other language. It should be maintained as it is. No language has such concept at all. That's unique to Sanskrit and Sanskrit-born languages. So Nityata has been further described by Vyasa in his commentary. Okay.
So the last few lines of the Bhashya on this sutra, Vyasa says, Te dharmalakṣaṇāvasthāpariṇāmā dharmi swarupam anatikranta iti eka eva parināmah sarvan amon visheshan abhiplavate. So these dharmalakṣaṇāvasthāpariṇāmās, they never transgress, they never cross the dharmi swarupam, the underlying dharmi, the entity and its swarupa, they never cross, they never transgress. And therefore, all these, sarvan amon visheshan, so all these, this one parināma itself, it abhiplavate, it pervades all these parināmas. So we can consider this as a single parināma of the dharmi, because it then can be considered to pervade or apply to all the three dharmalakṣaṇāvasthāpariṇāmas as they have been defined and described. So essentially, Vyasa is synthesizing and conceptualizing, firstly by analyzing it into three aspects and synthesizing it back to say it can be considered as one, and when conceptualized that way, it will pervade all the three. Ata ko'ayam parināmah, then what is this single parināma? Avasthitasya dravyasya purva dharma nivruttau dharmantarotpattihi parināmah. So here it says avasthitasya dravyasya, whichever dravya is under consideration having a certain state, it's giving up or it's changing from a purva dharma. Here a dharma is a more generic term. Dharma in this sentence stands for what we have been calling dharmalakṣaṇāvastha. It's a general, a purva dharma, the previous attribute, previous state. So for any dravya under consideration, anything under consideration, the purva dharma nivrutti, the going away of a previous state, and dharmantara utpatti, the coming, the emerging, the arising, the coming of the dharmantara, another state, another dharma, that is the parināmah. So having analyzed it in detail, having addressed all the objections, having established how transformations are to be understood in the context of Prakriti made up of Sattva, Raja, Tama, and in the previous sutras, having seen that in the context of Chitta and its the sampragnata samadhi states as well as the normal Vyutthana state, then further extending it to all bhutas and indriyas, and then considering the different objections. Vyasa then summarizes this whole thing as saying all of this discussion could also be considered as a single parināma, which could then simply be described as the going away of previous state and the arriving of the next state. So purva dharma nivruttau dharmantara utpattihi parināmah, that is the transformation. And with this we cover Sutra 3.13 and its long but deep and interesting bhashya, which also gives a good glimpse of the kind of philosophical rigor, the exactitude that is required to consider different objections and putting forth the current, our own point of view as is done by Vyasa to establish that it is sound and consistent. So that is what Vyasa has been. And in further sutras also we will see these arguments continued, but at this point, Sutra 3.13 and its bhashya, we have finished.
So Vyasakar has led a wonderful terminology. Yes, it is parināma, everything is changing, and there can be called as only one parināma. What is that one parināma? It cannot be called as dharma parināma, lakṣana parināma, avastha parināma. But then he lends a wonderful term, dharmantarotpattihi, dharmantarotpatti parināma. That purva dharma nivruttau, the earlier state having given up and new state coming up, is always happening in all material world. There is constant change in some form or the other. Basically, it is one form that it gives a previous state and takes a new state. Uttara parināma, purva parināma, nivruttau, uttara parināma, coming up. And therefore, he lends a beautiful term, dharmantarotpatti parināmā. That's how we can be also summing up, and we should be grateful to this concept that Vyasa has given, having discussed all parināmas. Ultimately, he says there is only one parināma. And that one parināma, he has given a nomenclature, which is indeed absolutely apt, because there is always a dharmantaranam when the changes are taking place. Now, all these changes are taking place in a substrate matter, what is called as constant underlying matter. Now he comes to discuss about that underlying matter. Okay.
So next time we will continue the next sutra, that is the dharmi, the underlying matter. We will, Vyasa and Patanjali will look at. So let's stop for today. and recite shlokas on Guruji. Vaijñānikam pravaktrutva आसनेषु कलाविदम् योगाभ्यासे च तत्त्वज्ञम् वन्देऽहं सुन्दरं गुरुम् योगवृक्षो हि लोकेऽस्मिन् यत्प्रेरणेन वर्धितः योगाचार्यगुरो तुभ्यं सुन्दराय नमो नमः. Thank you.
Namaskar all of you.